April 19th, 1943. Spring in Warsaw, Poland. The date that marks the most brutal uprising against the Germans on occupied soil. Elias, a 19-year-old boy, orphaned of parents taken to Treblinka, and brother to Miriam, executed for hiding a piece of bread, decided he would not die in silence. With a revolver wrapped in a tallit and rags soaked in stolen gasoline, he crafted Molotov cocktails in a dark basement. That night, it wasn't an army that struck back. It was a starving boy, raised between walls and silence, who turned a forgotten alley into hell. In mere seconds, 15 German soldiers were swallowed by the flames. The patrol became smoke, the Street of Boots became a grave, and his name, Elias, began to be whispered among the ruins, not as a legend, but as a promise. Warsaw would not be remembered only for hunger, but for the fire that refused to die. But before we continue with the video, drop a comment saying where you're from and what time it is there. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel. The Warsaw ghetto breathes smoke. The air is heavy with the stink of burning fabric, scorched wood, and something Elias doesn't name anymore. Because once you've smelled it, you never unsmell it. It gets into your teeth, into your dreams. He stands at the edge of the building's collapsed stairwell, boots sunk into wet ash. 19 years old, but in the mirror, when there is one, he looks older than his father did the last time he saw him, his father, and Miriam. He closes his eyes. For a moment, all he hears is the breathing of rats behind a broken wall and the far-off crack of gunfire that doesn't even make people flinch anymore. The ghetto is silent, but it's not peace. It's the silence of exhaustion, of people too broken to scream. Elias climbs down what used to be stairs, each step slow, careful. Beneath his coat, wrapped in the last remaining thing he has from the old world, a torn, blood-stained tallit, is a revolver. It doesn't feel like a weapon yet. It feels like a sin. He hadn't planned on getting involved, but involvement found him when the rabbi handed him the gun the night before, eyes hollow, voice like dry leaves. "This is not for vengeance," he'd said. "It's for memory. Make sure we're not forgotten." The tallit had still smelled like the synagogue. Incense, dust, home. Elias hasn't taken it off since. He crosses the alley, avoiding puddles that might not be water. Above him, laundry lines hang with nothing but ghosts, ripped shirts, bullet-riddled curtains, an old child's dress. A door opens a crack. Eyes peek through. Someone recognizes him and closes it fast. People know why he's walking like this. What's wrapped under that coat? He turns onto a street that used to hold bakeries, now filled with bricks, dead pigeons, and two boys digging for something beneath the rubble. Not food, bones. Their own version of archaeology, trying to prove they existed. At the back of a burnt-out print shop, Elias taps 3 times. A click, a code word. The door opens just enough for a thin figure to let him in. Isaac, 20, maybe 21, built like a coal shovel, angular, wiry, all edges. "You're late," Isaac mutters. "I had to cross Boot Street," Elias replies. "They're moving patrols." Isaac nods, motions him down a hallway filled with shadows. The cell waits in a space smaller than a stable. 5 others. Rivka, the only woman, watches him without blinking. David, the old printer who lost both sons in the first deportation. 2 teenagers who haven't said a word since they joined. And then there's the radio boy, Yitz, they call him, because he's always the first to pick up news scraps from guards, from bribes, from dying whispers. They sit in near darkness, only one candle lighting the center table. On it, glass bottles lined up like testaments, dirty rags, a half-burnt map. Elias sits. David speaks first. His voice is slower than it used to be. "Tonight we begin. No one claps. No one cheers. Because they all know what that means." Elias picks up a bottle, begins stuffing a soaked rag into its neck. It's old vodka, stolen from an officer's stash. No one drinks anymore. Everything burns better than it heals. They work in silence. Isaac mixes more fuel. Rivka sharpens a broken screwdriver, turning it into a spike. Everyone has a task. Everyone has someone they've lost. That's what binds them tighter than ideology. Rivka glances over. "You sure you can throw one of these?" Elias nods. "I used to throw shoes at my sister." Rivka smirks. The first sign of warmth he's seen in weeks. The map shows a patrol route, Boot Street, as it's now called, where the German soldiers march every morning in perfect lines like clockwork. The sound of their boots slapping stone is a soundtrack to everything. 15 soldiers walk the route. Same time, same rhythm. The plan is simple. Hit them during the changeover. Molotovs from the rooftops, barricades in the alleys, Kill as many as possible, loudly. Let the ghetto know it's not dead yet, and then vanish. 15, Isaac says. 1 for each family we've lost. No one corrects him. They've all lost more than that. Elias most of all. He remembers Miriam, not her death. He still can't picture it clearly. Only the way she looked when she handed him the last crust of bread, her fingers already trembling. For later, she'd said, it had been her own dinner. The soldiers found it during a sweep, called it theft. Shot her in front of a wall she used to draw flowers on with chalk. Now he's going to set fire to men wearing that same uniform, not for justice, for memory. They finish preparing just before midnight. Elias climbs with Isaac and Rivka onto the rooftop of an old medical clinic. Wind whips their coats. Below, Boot Street sleeps unaware. He counts 1, 2, 15. The moon hides behind smoke clouds. Then, the first sound of boots. It's rhythmic, cold, almost ceremonial. Elias grips the bottle. His fingers don't shake, not anymore. When the first line of soldiers passes the alley, Isaac whispers, now. Flames erupt. Bottles arc through the air, silent for a moment, then exploding in orange screams. Fire engulfs the lead soldiers. One runs, his uniform melting into skin. Another drops, flailing. Rifle clattering. Screams echo. Chaos ignites. Rivka hurls a second bottle, dead on. A soldier's helmet flies off, hair ablaze. The others scramble, firing blindly into windows. Elias throws his last cocktail. It hits a truck tire. Flames catch. Metal groans. He watches one man, tall, young, probably no older than himself, stumble into a wall and slump, half his body burning. Elias doesn't look away. This is for Miriam, for his mother's scarf, left behind in the snow, for the man who offered them work, then turned them in for ration stamps. Sirens scream. German voices rise. The retaliation begins immediately. Orders, dogs, gunshots. Elias and the others drop down the back ladder, vanishing into the labyrinth of alleys. They don't speak. Every second counts. They reach the safe house, panting, smoke on their clothes, ash in their hair. David meets them with wide eyes. You did it? Isaac nods. 15. Outside, the ghetto is no longer silent. Gunfire rattles. Boots storm doors. A baby wails. Somewhere, a man shouts in German, "Find them! They won't rest tonight." Elias sits in the corner, revolver still in his hand, tallit over his lap. He stares at nothing. Rivka sits beside him, her arm scraped. Isaac smokes something that doesn't smell like tobacco. No one speaks of what they saw, because if they do, the screams will return. Then, 3 knocks. Everyone freezes. David reaches for the candle. Isaac cocks a gun. The knocks again, harder. Elias rises. He places the tallit back over his shoulder. If it's death on the other side of that door, so be it. He's already lit the fire. Let the silence burn. The name wasn't official. On German maps, it had no name at all. Just a number, a designation between block clearances. But to those trapped behind the walls, it was known as Ulica Buto, the Street of Boots, because every morning, and again before dusk, the boots came. Elias first learned its rhythm while crouched inside a collapsed attic 2 floors above what used to be a bakery. Every day without fail, 15 German soldiers patrolled the length of it, always in pairs, except the officer, who walked alone, eyes straight ahead. Their steps synchronized, leather heels hammering cobblestones like drums at an execution. That sound, it got into your bones. On the second morning after the ambush, Elias returned to the bakery ruins with Isaac. The building groaned with the weight of fire damage, but it was still tall enough for a view. Boots marched below. The routine hadn't changed. Elias whispered, "They didn't even slow down." Isaac chewed a piece of boiled potato, likely the last they had, and shook his head. "They want us to see them. That's the point. What if we hit them again?" "With what?" Isaac leaned closer to the edge, watching the patrol pass. "We're out of glass, and the fuel cache was moved. Too many eyes now." Elias didn't answer. His hand rested on the revolver under his coat. A single shot wouldn't stop 15, but the thought stayed with him. Back in the safe house, the atmosphere had changed. After the fire, their faces were harder, quieter. Rivka spoke less. David stopped singing Hebrew hymns under his breath. The 2 youngest boys, David and Lizer, hadn't smiled once, but something else had changed too. For the first time, the ghetto whispered about them. A boy passed Elias in the street and murmured, "You're one of them, aren't you? The Firebringers." He didn't respond, but the boy grinned anyway, like he'd met a ghost. and lived to tell the tale. Inside the loft, Rivka laid out a charcoal sketch of the street, every window, every alley, even sewer openings. She'd been watching longer than anyone. She pointed at the northern wall. "That's our blind spot. The officer always turns his head toward this building. If we can reach the second floor, we could get a shot from above." Isaac scoffed. "And get trapped again. We weren't trapped last time. But you call what happened 2 nights ago a clean escape." Elias stepped in. "We hit them, hard. We burned through that street like lightning. Now they're watching it, but that doesn't mean we stop." Rivka nodded. "We just need a new angle." Silence stretched. The candle sputtered. Yitz, the radio boy, finally spoke. "There's talk the Ukrainians are moving in on the south side, with dogs. They're sniffing out fuel and weapons." Elias narrowed his eyes. Sniffing out or being told where to look? Everyone glanced around. It was a dangerous thought, that there was a traitor among them. That night, Elias didn't sleep. Instead, he followed the street from above, rooftop to rooftop, barefoot to muffle sound. The cold bit at his toes. His coat caught on nails, but he needed to understand it better, needed to know why the Germans hadn't changed their routine. And then he saw it. A soldier, alone, pacing near the checkpoint wall, lighting a cigarette with hands that trembled. Not fear, withdrawal. Elias knew the look, a smoker with empty pockets. He watched the soldier for 20 minutes. The man kicked at the snow, muttered to himself, lit a stub twice before tossing it. Then he turned and disappeared into the shadows. Elias filed it away. Every crack mattered. On the way back, he passed a man kneeling beside a drain. Elias stopped. The man didn't look up. Elias whispered, "Too late for washing." The man replied in Yiddish, "Some dirt can't wait." He stood, older, thin, with gray stubble, but his eyes were sharp. "Rabbi Mendel," Elias said. The rabbi looked him over. "I hear your name rides on fire now." "I didn't ask for that. No one does." The rabbi paused. "But names burn longer than flesh." Elias didn't know what to say. "I buried 4 boys this week," the rabbi went on. "Children. One had your sister's name carved into a piece of wood. Said he found it near the school ruins." Elias felt his chest tighten. "She gave bread to the wrong child," the rabbi said. "But I wonder, what child is ever wrong?" Elias looked away. The rabbi stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Whatever you burn next, make sure it's worth the ash." The next morning, Rivka woke Elias before dawn. "Come," she said. "We're going high." He followed her up a rickety ladder behind the printing press. The roof there gave a clear view not only of Boot Street, but the square beyond it. German supply carts, a water station, and to the east, a motorbike checkpoint. 2 men stationed at all times. "We never noticed it before," she said, "because we were too busy watching the street." Elias took out his father's old compass. Useless for direction in a dead city, but helpful for angles. "If we light the checkpoint," he said, "the carts will reroute. They'll go through the side alleys." "Exactly. And then we hit them." They planned in whispers, tracing escape routes between chimneys. Isaac joined them later, still skeptical. "What about civilians?" he asked. "They'll torch whole buildings if they lose a checkpoint." "They already do," Rivka said. "Still, we're not murderers." Elias looked at him. "No, but we are at war." Isaac stared back, then sighed. "I'll get the fuel." That afternoon, the cell moved in pairs. They scavenged old radio parts, cloth from the tailor's ruins, sugar, soap, anything flammable. Yitz found 2 full kerosene cans hidden under a staircase. David and Leeser built bottle crates from piano frames. By nightfall, the operation was ready. But then, something went wrong. Elias returned to the hideout to find David alone. "Where are the others?" he asked. "Gone," David said. "Moved too soon. They heard a whistle near the depot and assumed we were compromised." Elias's blood ran cold. "Who whistled?" "No one knows." Panic crept in. They could be walking into a trap or an ambush. David looked older than ever. "You need to find them." Elias ran through the alleys, Rivka behind him. They reached the square in time to see flames already rising. One of the carts was on fire. Screams rang out. A soldier rolled on the ground, smoke pouring from his coat. Rivka shouted, "There!" David was on the roof, throwing another bottle. A shot rang out. He dropped. Elias froze. Liza screamed and vanished into a doorway. German shouts. Orders barked. Dogs. Elias grabbed Rivka's hand. "Back!" They ran through the smoke. Elias fired twice, missing both. The revolver was too cold, too light. They ducked behind a wall as bullets sprayed. When they reached the hideout again, only Isaac was there. He was bleeding. "They knew," he said. "Someone told them." "Who?" Isaac gritted his teeth. "I don't know, but it's one of us." They didn't speak for a long time. The candle flickered. Outside, the boots kept walking. Same number, same rhythm. But now Elias understood. They weren't marching for order. They were marching for dominance. To remind the ghetto, fire means nothing if it dies alone. Elias looked at Rivka, then at Isaac. We hit them again, he said. Isaac wiped blood from his face. When? Soon, but this time, we don't throw bottles. Rivka raised an eyebrow. Then what? Elias pulled a torn German map from his coat. He pointed at a sewer line and smiled for the first time in days. Let's bring the fire from underneath. Names die faster than bodies. The morning after the failed mission, Elias stood at the edge of the ruin where David used to sleep. The boy's laughter still echoed in his mind, an absurd sound in a place built on hunger and silence. Now there was no body. No grave, just scorched brick, broken glass, and a faint trail of blood that disappeared into soot. The Germans had moved quickly, sweeping away the evidence. The street had already returned to stillness, as if it had never screamed. Elias found David's notebook wedged under a loose floorboard. The cover was blackened, but the inside pages survived. Rows of names, scrawled in pencil, some underlined, others marked with symbols. A triangle, a question mark, an X. Each had a note. Feeds dogs near checkpoint. Quiet. Lost daughter in February sweep. Trustworthy. Avoid. Speaks too freely. Then, 2 lines written differently from the others. Miriam gave bread. Arrested 3 days later. Possible betrayal. J. He froze. Miriam, his sister. The bread. Her arrest. He never had all the pieces. And now, J. No surname. No location. Just that single letter, a wound in ink. Elias closed the notebook and walked back to the safe house, the weight of those 2 lines pressing against his ribs like a second pistol. That night, he gathered Isaac and Rivka by the stove. The fire was low, and the room smelled of wet wood and old fear. He laid the notebook on the table. David wrote this? Isaac asked, flipping through the pages. Most of it, Elias said. But this, he tapped the final 2 lines, wasn't his handwriting. Rivka leaned in. You're sure? Look at the M. His curves were tighter. This is someone else. Isaac frowned. So someone else knew about Miriam's betrayal and left a message. Rivka ran her finger along the words. J. Jacob, Joseph, Yankiel. All of them had access to supplies, Elias muttered. To movement schedules. To us. Isaac rubbed his forehead. Or maybe someone wanted us to think it was them. That possibility hung in the room like smoke. Rivka looked at Elias. What will you do? Find the truth. The next morning, Elias approached Rabbi Mendel near the water station. The old man sat alone, watching the street, with the kind of gaze that comes from losing more than one lifetime's worth of people. Elias handed him the notebook. The rabbi read the 2 lines, then closed it carefully. I never knew David wrote like this, he said. He didn't write that last part, Elias said, but he hid it. The rabbi looked away. You knew someone betrayed Miriam? Yes. Elias clenched his jaw. Who was it? I don't know, the rabbi replied. I suspected, but suspicion is not proof. Why didn't you tell me? The rabbi looked at him, sorrow in his voice. Because knowing who killed your sister won't bring her back, but it might kill more of you. Elias wanted to shout. Instead, he took the notebook and walked away. That afternoon, while passing the checkpoint near the southern wall, Elias saw an old woman sweeping near a broken cart. He'd seen her 100 times before. She was forgettable, scarf tied tight, shoulders hunched, a brass bell tied to her cart handle. It jingled with every push, but now the memory returned. David's last note, hidden inside the back cover of the notebook. If I'm gone, trust the woman with the bell. He approached slowly. Cold day, he said in Yiddish. She didn't look up. Colder tomorrow. I knew David. She paused, then said, he was too young for war. He left something for me, said you could help. The woman reached into her coat and handed him a folded scrap of paper, wrapped in wax. Inside, a name, Jakob Grinwald, and beneath it, collaborator. Elias stared at it. You're sure? I was there. He spoke German too well. His rations never ran out, and every time someone vanished, he seemed to know beforehand. Elias's stomach turned. The woman went back to sweeping. Elias returned to the hideout that night, name burning in his pocket. He didn't speak of it to Isaac or Rivka, not yet. Instead, he waited, watched. Jakob didn't show for 2 days. On the 3rd, word arrived. German officers had taken him from his flat. No shouting, no struggle, just in and out, gone. Isaac listened with a grim face. Someone else turned him in? Or, Rivka said, the Germans clean their floors when the stain starts to smell. No one celebrated. No one said his name again. Jakob vanished the same way Miriam did, into a silence that couldn't be burned away. Later that night, Elias returned to the attic where he and David used to watch the street. The patrol passed below. 15 soldiers, boots clapping in rhythm. Their coats shimmered with cold. He opened the notebook one last time. crossed out Jakob's name, then added a new line, Miriam, remembered, and below that, David, flame that stayed. He tore out the page, folded it into a matchbook, and lit it. The flame curled the edges, the ink blackened, then vanished. Some names were too heavy to carry. Some needed to be set free. There are things you never forget. The sound of footsteps outside your door at midnight. The knock that doesn't wait for an answer. The way your sister's hands trembled when she broke a loaf in two and handed you the bigger half. Elias had tried to bury the memory, but it kept clawing its way back. Miriam, 16, brave, always too generous. Even when generosity became a death sentence, the memory came in pieces now. The alley behind the bakery, Miriam's shawl pulled over her head, a child crying from hunger, her own crust of bread, wrapped in paper pressed into the child's palm. The child ran. 2 hours later, soldiers came. She didn't beg. Elias had watched from the next building, frozen. A coward, he told himself later. But the truth was simpler. He hadn't understood what he was seeing. Not until the shot echoed, and Miriam's body dropped like a bag of rags. He hadn't cried. Not then. He cried now, silently, sitting against the crumbled wall of what used to be their home, the sky gray with smoke, ash in his mouth. In the safe house, the others were restless. Since Jakob's removal, trust had frayed further. No one had spoken of betrayal again, but the silence was thicker now. Isaac sat sharpening a metal spike, the scraping sound rhythmic, aggressive. Rivka stitched a patch over her coat's torn sleeve, every needle movement precise. Yitz had brought word. The Germans were moving artillery through the southern checkpoint, less guarded, slow targets. We could hit it, Isaac said. Molotovs from the bridge, block the path with a cart, trap the first vehicle. Rivka didn't look up. And bring death to every room on this side of the ghetto? They're bringing death anyway. Not like that. Elias said nothing. He was staring at Miriam's name, now carved into the inside of his jacket sleeve. Not for sentiment, for memory. He looked at the map on the table. How many civilians live near that bridge? He asked. Isaac shrugged. 20, maybe 30. Children? Rivka nodded. Always. Elias closed his eyes. We find another way. Later that night, Rivka found Elias sitting alone behind the bakery. She sat beside him without speaking. After a moment, she said, "You blame yourself for her." Elias didn't answer. "I had a brother," she said. "He was 9, wanted to be a rabbi. One day he climbed a fence to chase a dog. A soldier saw him, shot him in the back." She paused. "I didn't move. I was 15 meters away. I could have screamed, maybe distracted him. I didn't." Elias looked at her. She met his eyes. "Guilt doesn't feed anyone," she said. "It just eats." By morning, the group had decided. The bridge attack was too risky. Instead, they would sabotage the supply crates at the eastern checkpoint. A new plan. Move at night. Intercept the cart before it reached the depot. Plant explosives in the barrels. "We'll need soap," said Yitz. "Saltpeter. Metal shavings." "We can get it," Isaac said. Rivka hesitated. "And who plants it?" Silence. Then Elias said, "I will." They moved that night under a half-moon sky, wrapped in smoke and hunger. Elias followed the supply trail with Isaac at his side. The cart was slow-moving, pulled by 2 conscripted workers. Jewish, ragged, unaware. 2 soldiers trailed behind, rifles slung. In the shadows, Elias crept forward, knelt beside a crate while the cart paused for a rest. Hands shaking, he opened the barrel and slipped in the package. Small, precise, just enough powder to scatter the cargo and kill whoever opened it. He closed the lid, moved back into the dark. The cart rolled on. 2 hours later, the explosion echoed across the ghetto. A fireball lit the checkpoint. Screams followed, not all German. Elias's breath caught. Later, Yitz came running. They pulled 10 bodies from the rubble. 3 soldiers, 2 couriers, 5 workers. Elias sat down. The air was too heavy to breathe. "They were ours," Yitz whispered. "The ones pulling the cart. They didn't know." No one spoke, because there was nothing to say. That night, Elias walked the same street where Miriam gave the bread. He lit a match and held it in his palm until it burned out. Then he whispered, "I'm sorry." Not just to her, to the workers, to David, to every name now written in ash. The numbers mattered. 15 soldiers, same street, same hour, same sound of boots against cobblestones, day after day after day. They walked as if untouchable, eyes forward, rifles ready, leather polished, steel beneath their heels and smoke on their collars. They didn't look at the windows. They didn't have to. The ghetto was quiet now, too quiet. And that's what Elias had been waiting for. The plan came together faster than any before. 2 Molotov teams, One sniper. A wall collapsed days earlier gave access to a second-story window directly above the intersection. Elias would take the high point. Rivka and Isaac would lead the ambush from below. They had just enough fuel left. Not enough for another mission. Just this one. One final fire. They moved at dusk. The ghetto looked deserted, but it never was. Faces behind curtains. Fingers gripping brick. People watching. Always watching. No one spoke as they took position. Elias crouched near the broken window, adjusting the rifle someone had smuggled in from outside. It was old, bolt action, and smelled of oil and rot, but it worked. He waited. Boots echoed down the street. 15, just like always. The first bottle flew from Rivka's hand like a prayer set alight. It shattered on the ground in front of the patrol leader, splashing fire up his legs. He screamed as his coat caught. The second landed in the middle of the formation, flames roaring into the dry winter coats of 3 more soldiers. Elias opened fire. 1 shot, head. Second shot, chest. The rest of the patrol scattered. Chaos. Orders shouted in German. Smoke billowed. Dogs howled. Another Molotov flew from the opposite rooftop. Isaac. 2 more soldiers fell, their bodies twisting in flames. The rest tried to run. Elias took the 3rd shot, then the 4th. By the end, the street was silent again, except now it was soaked in fire. 15 soldiers lay dead or dying. Some burned beyond recognition, others torn by bullets or shrapnel. No one celebrated. Elias climbed down, hands still shaking. Rivka met him at the alley entrance. "It's done," she said. Isaac appeared moments later, limping. "Let's move," he said. Fast. The retaliation came by morning. Germans stormed the ghetto in waves. Barracks torched. Anyone found outside was dragged into the street. At least 20 were executed before noon. A child was thrown from a 2nd-story window. Elias didn't see it, but he heard it. He couldn't forget the sound. In the hideout, the group sat in silence. Yitz returned with news. "They've sealed off the sewer lines, burned 3 exits. We can't stay," Isaac said. "We won't," Elias replied. "But not yet." Rivka looked at him. "One more?" Elias nodded. "There's still 1 target left." The German fuel depot was heavily guarded, but not impossible. The delivery route passed through a narrow corridor behind the old hospital, twice a week, always at night. Elias knew the driver, a Polish collaborator, greedy, careless. They watched the path for 2 nights. On the 3rd, they moved. The trap was simple: tripwire, glass shards, oil-soaked cloth hidden under crates. Elias did the wiring himself. When the truck passed, wheels rolled over the glass. Sparks flew. The flames did the rest. The explosion shook windows for 6 blocks. The fire climbed 20 meters into the sky, but this time, the cost was different. Rivka didn't return. She was nearest the blast, maybe too close. They waited until morning, but there was no sign of her. Isaac paced the hideout, fists clenched. "She was too close," he said again and again. Elias sat in silence. He held Rivka's scarf in his hand, found near the alley wall, still warm. That night, Elias walked the length of Boots Street. The fire had erased the scent of rot, but not the memory. 15 soldiers, 1 friend. And for what? He didn't know anymore. He only knew he had to keep moving. The last light in the ghetto flickered out on a Tuesday. Smoke still clung to the rooftops like ghosts too tired to leave. Elias stood at the edge of the hideout, wrapped in Rivka's scarf, staring into what remained of Boot Street. Blackened stone, blood in the cracks. The snow no longer white. They couldn't stay. Yitz was the one who said it out loud. "The sewers," he whispered. "It's the only way now." Elias nodded. They all knew it. The ghetto wasn't dying anymore. It was dead, and the Germans were burning the remains. The entrance was hidden beneath a shattered butcher shop. Isaac pried open the rusted grate while Elias kept watch. The others, Yitz, Dovid, and a boy named Salo, who had joined them days earlier, waited in silence. One by one they slipped below. Elias was the last to descend. The ladder was slick. The air hit him like a blow, wet, rank, alive with rot. The tunnel yawned before him, low and endless. He pulled the grate shut behind him. Above them, Warsaw burned. They moved in near darkness. Dovid carried a candle. Yitz held a folded map, already smudged with damp. Isaac led with a crowbar. Elias walked behind, watching their backs. The water came up to their ankles, then knees. Rats moved like shadows along the walls. The walls breathed, moaning with old air and shifting pipes. No one spoke. Voices carried too far underground. The map led them south. According to Salo, there was an exit in the forest beyond the wall, an old maintenance tunnel that hadn't been sealed. From there, if they survived the climb, the partisans might be waiting. Might. After 2 hours, Dovid collapsed. "I can't breathe down here," he gasped. Isaac helped him sit. Elias knelt beside him. "We rest 10 minutes. No more." They lit another candle. In its light, Elias saw something scrawled on the tunnel wall. A name, Miriam. He stared. Written in charcoal, faded, but there. Rivka must have passed through here once, or someone who remembered her. They moved again. The path twisted, narrowed. At one point, they had to crawl. Salo went first, squeezing through a gap in the brick. Halfway through, he screamed. Elias pulled him out, his hand bleeding from broken glass embedded in the tunnel floor. They wrapped it, kept going. The air grew colder, the water deeper. Then, they heard it. Voices, not German, whispers. At the next bend, a lantern flickered. Elias raised his hand, stopped the group. He moved ahead alone, revolver drawn. A figure appeared, gaunt, ragged, armed with a kitchen knife, but not a soldier. A girl, maybe 16. Her eyes widened. "You came from the north?" Elias nodded. "Follow me." They emerged an hour later into the tree line beyond the city. The sky was open again. Stars blinked through smoke. They collapsed in silence, sucking in the cold air like a drug. The girl whistled sharply, and from the trees, men emerged, thin, dirty, armed. Partisans. In the camp, a fire crackled. Real food cooked in pots. Blankets passed around. Elias sat against a tree, exhausted. Isaac leaned beside him. "We made it," he said. But Elias couldn't answer, because not all of them had. Rivka was gone. David, Miriam. David still coughed blood beside the fire. They had survived, but the fire followed, always. 2 days later, the commander of the partisans, a Ukrainian named Petrov, asked Elias for his name. He gave it. The man stared. "You're that Elias?" "What Elias?" "The boy from the ghetto, the fire, the 15. Elias didn't respond. Petrov nodded slowly. "They call you Elias of Warsaw." Elias looked away. He hadn't chosen that name, but he'd carry it now, like a flame in the dark. Winter came late that year. Snow didn't fall like silence. It fell like ash. Dirty, thin, drifting over the forest, as if the city had exhaled its last breath and dusted the trees with its remains. Elias stood at the edge of the partisan camp, rifle slung across his back, Rivka's scarf wrapped tightly around his neck. Beneath his coat, tucked between fabric and skin, he still carried the revolver the rabbi had given him. Cold metal, warm memory. They called him Elias of Warsaw now, even the Ukrainians, even the Russians. The French partisan who had lost an eye near Krakow called him the Fire Boy, but he didn't feel like any of those names. He felt like a shell with a match burning inside. The partisans had regrouped in an abandoned manor deep in the forest, near the banks of the Vistula River. The building was crumbling, roof half missing, but the stone walls held in the heat and blocked the wind. It was enough. Inside, they had maps, weapons, and a target, a German depot east of Lublin. One of the last strongholds supplying the garrisons, still clearing out the ghettos and hunting the resistance. Taking it out would do more than damage. It would send a message. Petrov, the partisan commander, pointed to the map during the briefing. "We'll strike on a moonless night. Small group, fast entry, plant explosives, burn fuel. No survivors." Elias watched silently, leaning against the wall. When Petrov finished, the room went quiet. Then the Frenchman spoke. "Let Elias lead the charge." All eyes turned. Petrov raised an eyebrow. "He's young. His name burns further than yours," the Frenchman said. Petrov looked at Elias. "You willing?" Elias nodded once. "I'll light the fuse." That night, Elias sat alone by the fire. He didn't sleep. He wrote names in the dirt with a stick. David, Rivka, Miriam, then erased them one by one. He thought about the rabbi's words, memory or survival. Maybe they were the same now. Maybe surviving was the only way to carry the memory. Isaac joined him near dawn. "You sure about this?" he asked. Elias didn't answer. Isaac nodded anyway. "Then I'm with you." The group left the next night. Elias, Isaac, Salo, and 2 Ukrainians with mining experience. One carried dynamite wrapped in flour sacks. The other carried fuel canisters strapped to his back like a soldier of fire. They moved through the woods, using old hunting paths. Every hour they stopped and listened. Silence, then kept moving. By sunrise, they reached the observation point, a rocky hill overlooking the depot. From above, it looked like a nest of metal and smoke. Barbed wire coiled around the perimeter. Watchtowers, fuel tanks lined up like fat insects ready to burst. They camped in silence, watching the patrols, patterns, rotations, weak points. Elias traced the route on his palm with his finger, over and over. At night, the lights blinked across the snow, and Elias remembered Boot Street, the fire, the screams. He had thought those days were over. He had been wrong. The day before the attack, a courier arrived from another cell near Warsaw. He carried a coded message, addressed to Elias. Inside, a folded page from a torn notebook, David's notebook, a name circled in charcoal, M. Mendel, the rabbi. Elias stared at it. On the back of the page, another message. He knew it wasn't just Jacob. Miriam's arrest was approved. For leverage, Elias felt the cold punch through his chest. He closed the note, folded it, burned it in the snow. That night, Elias told Isaac everything. The bread, the rabbi, the betrayal. Isaac listened, jaw clenched, then said, "So what now?" "I still light the fuse," Elias said. "Even with that in your head?" "Especially because of that." Isaac placed a hand on his shoulder. "Then light it for all of them." They moved at midnight. Moonless sky, wind biting. The Ukrainians cut the wire. Isaac slipped inside first. Shadow against shadows. Elias followed, hard a slow drum. They planted charges at the fuel tanks, at the radio station, at the barracks. Every movement rehearsed, every breath measured. In the command room, Elias paused. There were photos on the wall of German officers, of Warsaw in flames. One of them had scribbled across a map in thick black ink, "All exits sealed, final sweep, April." He stared at it. Treblinka, Łódź, Warsaw. His name wasn't on the map, but it was burned into the space between the lines. The last charge was placed near the supply trucks. They retreated silently, through the gap in the fence. Elias turned once, just before the tree line. He saw the depot bathed in yellow floodlights. A perfect target. He lit the fuse and ran. The explosion shook the forest. Fire clawed into the sky, turning trees orange, metal black. The screams came next. Panicked, desperate animal. A second explosion followed, fuel tanks, then a third. By the time they reached the extraction point, the sky behind them was a furnace. Elias didn't stop running until he collapsed beside the river. He didn't cry, he didn't speak, he just watched the flames eat the sky. In the camp, Petrov raised a toast to the boy from Warsaw, but Elias walked away. He sat alone under the trees, staring at the embers floating upward. Isaac joined him. "You lit the fuse," Elias nodded, "and I burned with it. They say fire consumes everything, but fire also reveals." When the sun rose after the explosion, the depot was a ruin. Black smoke curled into morning sky. Metal girders twisted like bones. Flames still hissed in corners. The thick smell of burnt fuel and iron lingered in the air, heavy like grief. Elias stood at the edge of the devastation. Snow lay over parts of the ground, untouched, white, mocking. Footprints, scorched earth, fragments of uniforms, broken tools, so many things lost. He watched survivors, partisans pulling bodies, dragging the wounded, wrapping the dead in blankets, faces unrecognizable beneath soot. Some screamed for lost brothers, some didn't know what they screamed for. He felt Rivka's scarf around his neck. He shut his eyes and saw her face. He tried to remember her laugh, not the one before the mission, but the real one, before everything broke. Days passed in the forest. The partisans moved from camp to camp. Food was scarce. The cold was deeper than the winter should have been. Elias didn't sleep well. His nightmares returned. Miriam's face behind a uniform, flashing boots, a bread crust dropping, a gunshot echoing. He dreamed of Jacob, of the rabbi, Mendel, the man who had given him faith, who had betrayed in silence. Misplaced trust, Elias whispered one night beside the fire. Salo, the boy who had run with him through the sewers, looked at him. "Do you regret it?" Salo asked, voice small. Elias didn't answer at first. Then he said, "No, because her name, Miriam's, would have disappeared if we did nothing, if I did nothing." Word came that Warsaw was burning, after the uprising had been crushed, after leaders had died or fled, after thousands were deported. That many survivors escaped through bunkers and tunnels, but many others were rounded up. Elias knelt in the snow that night and let tears fall. The world had not saved them. The world had looked away. But he had lit the fuse of something. Not victory, not in that world, but remembrance. A few months later, war's tides shifted. Rumors spread of German retreat. The forest camps grew restless. One evening, after a supply run, Elias sat with the soldiers and partisans around a small fire. Someone recited psalm in Yiddish. Others whispered prayers in Polish. The sky above was clear, stars sharp against black. They spoke of what to do after the war. Some said go home. Some said leave Poland forever. Elias listened. He touched the medal stolen from the depot, one of many small trophies they had taken not for pride but for proof that they had been there, that they fought, that they existed. Years later, much later, Elias walks a cobbled street in a city that has rebuilt itself. Buildings rise new where ruins once stood. Children laugh in parks where ash used to settle. He is older. His back is straighter now, but his eyes carry weight. He carries no weapon, only memory. A child approaches him, small hands, asking questions in a language that sounds like hope. "Sir, were you Elias of Warsaw?" He pauses. He remembers the fire, the sacrifice, the betrayal, the names in ash. He kneels, resting a hand on the child's shoulder. "I was," he says softly. "I still am." He shows the child a small book, pages yellowed, edges burned. Miriam's name is inside, David's, Rivka's, Jakob's. "Why do you keep these names?" the child asks. "Because names are the only things no one can burn," Elias replies. "Even when bodies fall, even when walls break, even when the world looks away." The child looks at the names, fingers tracing letters. Elias sees recognition there, not just of the past, but of survival. That night, Elias dreams again. He dreams of Miriam's laughter, of the bread crust, of the rabbi's tallit, of the fire sweeping Boot Street, of the explosion at the depot. He dreams of eyes, not full of fear now, but of recognition, people who remember, people who learn, a face in the audience reading his name, someone whispering that they heard the story, someone carrying a book like he did. He wakes before dawn. The room is still. The wind shakes windows. He lays the notebook on the table, opens it to Miriam's page. He reads, "Miriam, remembered, David, flame that stayed." He closes the notebook. He breathes. Out the window, smoke rises faintly in the distance. Somewhere, always somewhere. But here, in this moment, the fire has not died. In his final days, his hands slow, his voice softer. World images change. Monuments, memorials, recordings. People ask questions. Children write essays. Survivors gather. Museums open. They piece together what was, what happened. The Ulika Butau, the fires, the betrayal, the price of bread, the names. He attends a memorial service in Warsaw. Once, many years later, snow falls lightly. Flames flicker in torches. Speakers speak of heroism, of tragedy. Monuments glint in the late afternoon light. He stands among the crowd, old but unbowed. A woman reads the names of the fallen, Miriam, David, Rivka. Elias listens. A child beside him whispers, "I know your name now." Elias closes his eyes. The wind carries ashes or snow, or both. He lets it sweep over him. He doesn't believe in peace, not in the sense of ending pain, but he believes in memory. He believes that the world remembers, because remembering demands responsibility, that children who learn his story will ask, "What would I do if I were him?" He hopes they carry fire in their hands, but also wisdom. The ashes that remain, they are bitter. They remind him of loss, of betrayal, of violence that scarred the earth. But they also carry seeds, seeds of defiance, the flicker of a flame not chosen, but claimed. Elias walks away from the flame, leaving nothing but silence behind him, except names, names that remember. If you made it this far, it's because this story hooked you. So subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next ones. Hit the like button to show support, and share it with someone who needs to hear what almost nobody dares to tell.